Hey, welcome back to another Homeless Hippie Hyatt vlog. And this video I want to talk about cravings and how we can kind of deal with cravings and kind of breaking down cravings a little bit more as to kind of like what's going on there, at least to the best of my ability. So a craving for me is something that has it's basically a strong desire that generally, if not always, has some level of resistance to it. So it's this thing that you want, and it's more than just like a clean desire that just like flows through you, and you can just allow it and be in that desire. It's like this stimulating desire that seems to almost always have some level of resistance to it, whether in this video we're going to concentrate mostly on food cravings. So whether the resistance is that, that food is not good for me, or whether it's just something that you really want that would feel super satisfying for you, mostly in the form of like instant gratification, but maybe you don't have access to it in that moment, and you just really want it. But often I think cravings occur more when you've got something that's within reach, or something that you can easily kind of just get up and get, that you're trying to resist. But one thing you'll notice if you're on like a fruitarian or raw vegan lifestyle, or you have experienced that lifestyle for a decent amount of time, is that with fruit mostly, there's not like generally this deep craving for fruit. It's more of just like this clean hunger and desire. It's not like you're just sitting there like, oh my god, I gotta get some fruit, it's more like your body knows that it's ready. It's like, okay, it's time to eat, and then you get up and you have your fruit, and there's not really a whole lot of conflict there within you. So I think it's just good to recognize that with foods like fruit, and maybe some like leafy green vegetables and stuff like that, or some easy to digest cooked vegetables like squash, like zucchini mostly, that these foods aren't really that stimulating, and they're not really that sedating. So your brain and your nervous system aren't like going crazy with chemicals that are just like a rush with these foods. So it's just kind of like this calm zen, like, okay, I'm hungry, this is like time to eat, obviously, and then you go do it, and that's pretty much the end of it, and you feel pretty good afterwards. But with cravings, there's oftentimes a stimulating or sedating effect, and oftentimes that's what we're after. It's mostly like the state. We want to experience that instant gratification of like satisfying ourselves with stimulation or with sedation, and it's generally caused by being uncomfortable in the state that we're currently in, so not really allowing the now, so to speak, having some sort of resistance to where we're at right now and how we're feeling right now. There's some sort of discomfort, and we want to basically change our state, and food is often something that's super available that we can just go get, and it gives us this kind of instant hit of pleasure and comfort. But anyways, I want to talk about some sort of strategies to dealing with this. So for one, cravings are often just like a passing sort of feeling, and if you're able to wait long enough, then generally they'll go away. I've had many times where I'm in the grocery store, like craving something snacky or cooked or whatever it is, and I'll be like in this resistance for like 10 or 20 minutes, just like, should I get it? I'm just like walking down the aisles, like in this discomfort in my body, like my nervous system is all activated, like, I want this thing, but I don't want it. Which just is a great like description of how cravings kind of look. And then after like 10 or 20 minutes of just me going crazy in my head and like feeling anxious in my body, all of a sudden it just drops, and then I'm like, oh, I don't even want this thing. And then all of a sudden it's just easy for me to go to the checkout and pay for what I've got. So I've noticed that if I just hold off or just like sit in the resistance, or better than that would be like just allowing the resistance to be there and feeling it and letting it flow through you for like 10 or 20 minutes, then often it'll just go away on its own. It's just kind of like a passing thing, just like your thoughts and all that. So one strategy you can use, which is not like, I'm going to get to a strategy that I think is even more effective, but one thing you can do is just every time you get a craving, set a 10-minute timer. And because the whole thing here is the resistance, we're trying to deal with the sort of resistance to these things. And like, how can we let go of the resistance so that way we don't have to just like keep battling ourselves and move through the sort of craving, in just a less resistant way, and one that's just a little easier. So next time you have a craving, set a timer for 10 minutes and say, okay, whatever it is you're craving, just say, okay, I'll have this, I'm allowed to have this food item or whatever after my 10-minute timer goes off. And then you set the 10 minutes, and then you let your mind and your body know that you're going to be able to have that after 10 minutes. So you just don't even worry about it. You go off, keep doing what you're doing, focusing on other things, because you know that the timer is just going to go off and you can have it. And then often after, a 10 or 15-minute timer, then you'll find that the craving may have already gone away, which isn't always the case. But a more effective method for this, I think, that I've been trying to use lately and has been effective for me, is actually allowing your mind to go deep into the fantasy of indulging in that thing that you're craving. And often I think that this is like a almost scary idea for some people, because they think, oh, well, if I indulge in the fantasy of what I'm craving, then that will just increase my craving for it. I'll be thinking about it. I'll want it even more, and it'll just tempt me even worse. But that's actually not the case. The reason that you're having such a strong visceral reaction to your cravings is that you're resisting them. And there's a way to not resist your cravings while also not giving in to the actual like action of eating that food you want, and that is by fully allowing and accepting the craving, allowing it to come in, and not only that, but fantasize about it. Let your mind play out every detail that it wants to. Imagine yourself smelling the thing that you want, tasting it, and not only just like tasting it, but fully like being blissed out by this pizza or cookies or whatever it is you want, and do that until your mind is completely satisfied by this fantasy. So that's like basically opening up your nervous system and your mind and just completely destroying the resistance to this thing, because you're allowing yourself to indulge in it, but basically just in fantasy. And that's enough for your mind. I mean, most people know now that like studies have shown that your mind has a hard time telling the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And so if you fully let this, thing play out, like say if you're craving a cookie, just set a 10-minute timer, and for 10 minutes fantasize about eating the cookies and eating them until you're stuffed. Eat 100 of them in your fantasy if you want to, and feel what it's like to eat them in your body, and not only to eat them, but to like have joy around it and positive association. Let yourself fully fully allow yourself to have that experience, and for it to be okay for your mind to fantasize about eating these things and just going wild over it, and having a blast. Being just like this little food gremlin. And so what that'll do is completely drop the resistance, because the big fight that you're having within yourself is that you have this resistance with this thing. It's this back and forth pool of like, I want it, I don't want it, I want it, I don't want it. And that's what's basically keeping the perpetual cycle going within you, is this back and forth pull. Most people feel like they have to resist their temptations in order to get rid of them, but actually resisting the temptation is what's keeping the temptation there, because you're not completing the sort of cycle and ending the pattern that is wanting to be played out. So just generally becoming more and more aware of these triggers, and noticing when they're happening and noticing when you're resisting them is a really good place to start. Just anytime you're craving something, notice the resistance that's there and get curious about that. Like, why am I resisting this? What's happening here? And when you notice that you're resisting, then see what happens when you just stop resisting. And but not, not necessarily in reality, because it is a real truth that you can, eat these things and give into them in real life and then feel really crappy in your body and have a mental sluggishness and a lot of self criticism for that. And there's ways to, kind of get rid of that resistance too. But for me, I also want to stop eating those things, not just get rid of the resistance to eating them, but also to stop eating them because I know that they aren't good for my body. And yeah, one of the best ways I've found is by just dropping the resistance, by allowing it into my imagination and not criticizing it as bad or judging it in a negative way, but just completely indulging in the fantasy. And then I notice there will be a point where in the fantasy you're just gonna your mind's gonna be over it and be satisfied and be done, and then it'll just be like, oh, okay, I completely played out that fantasy. That was really nice and actually enjoyable. Like, you can find a lot of joy in these fantasies of indulging the things that you're craving and just like demonizing. So yeah, kind of like let those demons in and feel them out and stop resisting them. And you'll find that they're pretty satisfied and that they don't need to stick around. And then they just kind of like poof away. And this isn't something that's probably gonna, like you just do it a few times and then you're good forever. Life is kind of like a constant flow and constant oscillation back and forth, and you're gonna deal with cravings probably your whole life in different areas. And so it's just a constant thing that you'll have to keep doing most likely for a long time. The game doesn't really end. You just got to keep if this is the path you want, just keep noticing the resistances and how you can fully let in those resistances, and just notice how that transforms you. And this works in a lot of different areas of life. You can apply this anywhere you have a resistance, whether it's in relationship or work or wherever. Just notice the resistances, play out the fantasies that you have, allow the resistances, and communication. If someone else is involved, communicating, like what's true for you and being vulnerable is really key there. And I'm definitely not recommending that you actually play out a lot of these fantasies in real life that you're resisting. Like, say you want to just yell at your boss and like let him have it, or just like, yeah. I don't recommend actually doing that, but if you can safely play that fantasy out in your mind, or like if it's something that you are feeling resistance to with your partner, playing that out, and oftentimes that will like help you see clearly, because you're just stuck in this pattern because you're resisting it, and it's hard to like find other alternative outside the box ways of thinking when you're just constantly in this resistance of like, oh my god, I hate my boss, I just freaking want to just like scream at him and tell him to go to hell, but you're not doing it and you're resisting that urge to do that. That's kind of keeping the cycle going, but then actually doing it has consequences as well. So the best thing that I've found is to just play out the fantasy. That will clear your head, that will like set you in a nice more just clear state of being, because it's like you've just exhausted that craving to do that, and then your mind's good and is like satisfied, and then you can work on doing things in a healthier way. But sometimes the first step is like writing it down, or if you're alone, you can like shout and scream and say things, but not directly to the person in a harmful way. And then that will often just like open you up to being more compassionate and understanding, and actually coming to a resolution with this person, or with this craving that's inside of you, with yourself. in a way that's just way more harmonious. Alright, that's what I got in this video. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you try this out, and let me know how it goes and whether it works for you or not. And I'll see y'all on the next video.